everybody, and welcome to Kaladesh with the Pros panel here at PAX. We've shown you a lot of cards this weekend from Kaladesh, and I thought, you know what, I want to sit down with some professional level players and get into the nitty gritty on these cards, so that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm your host, I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm going to be moderating this panel as we work our way through some of the cards that have already been previewed and talk to some very high-level professional players about what they think about the cards, what's going to happen in standard, limited, maybe even modern and forward. So let's get into this. Let's introduce our pros. First up, we've got from Sweden, Joel Larsson. Joel, welcome.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you.
It's nice to see you. I know you have a lot of strong opinions about this set, and I'm excited to hear those. Sitting right next to Joel, Brad Nelson. Brad, looking good, buddy.
Hey, everyone. You don't own a T-shirt? Not one?
Nope.
I guess.
Brad, did you own goggles before showing up here, or is this recent?
Yes. No. I was prepared for this set.
Yeah, you can tell that you're prepared. It also gives you a hint of some of the cards that Brad happens to like in this set. We'll get into more into that in just a few minutes here. Over on my right, I'd like to welcome Steve Rubin to the panel. Steve, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Marshall.
Yeah, congratulations, everybody, by the way, on making it to the World Championship. I know you'd rather be playing, but not a bad second prize. You get to hang out with me for a while. Last but not least, on the end of the couch there, Reid Duke. Reid, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Reid, is it true that your favorite color is green, and is that Magic-specific color or in general?
That's both. That counts everything.
The old 2-for-1. Okay, guys, so, of course, this weekend at PAX has been all about the new set, Kaladesh, and we've been barraged with preview cards as we've worked our way through here, and let's get into this. We're going to start off by going over the mechanics. For anybody at home that maybe didn't get a chance to get fully caught up on it, I want to get your initial take on the new mechanics in the set as we work our way through, and then we've picked out some choice cards and even some combos to go over as well that you guys have chosen that have you excited about, various formats and various cards. So let's start things off with energy. Take a look at energy. It's a new resource generated by and used to pay for costs and activated abilities. It doesn't go away at the end of the turn like mana, and most cards that give you energy also provide a way for you to spend it, and vice versa. Reid, what are your first thoughts on energy? It's kind of a new in-game currency.
Yeah, energy seems like it's going to be very cool. It's just a completely new resource in Magic that we've never seen before. The fact that it doesn't empty at the end of your turn, like mana, as you mentioned, means that it can play to my greedy nature when I play Magic and just amassing all the energy and finding the best way to use it. It's going to be fun as the spoiler season, progresses, seeing the new energy cards roll out and the ways that we actually get to spend the energy that cards like this are making.
Yeah, you guys can take a look at the screen to get an idea for some of the energy cards. And Steve, I wanted to touch on what Reid was saying there, which is that we kind of need to see the whole picture before we know, right? It's like, oh, these cards make energy. Well, where can I spend it?
Yeah, of course. Once we see all of the energy cards, it's going to be interesting because some cards will generate you energy and then big finishes like we see the Etherworks Marvel here is some way of getting a big finish to energy spender, but it might be tough to get energy. Your opponent might be able to remove your energy or something. We don't really know exactly what R&D has in store for us. So.
That's right, and it could be incremental gain over the course of a longer game. Joel, you have something to say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all going to be about how hard is it to get actual energy versus the benefit of having it. We can see the Marvel. Sure, it's great to activate that and hit Emrakul. Everybody's going to love that. But how much resources can we actually use? I mean, how much resources do we need to put into getting energy? That's a big problem, right?
Yeah, you look at it and you say, how many cards, how much mana do I need to convert to this? What jumps out to you about energy, Brad?
Well, the only thing about energy that stands out to me is that I'm probably just going to get energy screwed along with mana screwed and all the other things that happen. So that's what I see.
Hey, you couldn't get screwed so many ways.
we call that complaint equity, right? And now you can tweet about something new, about how did this happen to me. Okay, so that's energy. We're going to talk a little bit more about energy later with some of our cards. Let's move on to the next main mechanic, which are vehicles. You can take a look at vehicles. They're artifacts that can turn into creatures by crewing them with your other creatures, which is kind of a cool concept. It gives you this picture of creatures jumping into some type of vehicle, car, and riding off into battle, which looks like exactly what we're going to be doing. You tap the creatures with their power equal to the crew number. Each vehicle has a crew number, which we'll see here. And then the crewed vehicles remain creatures until the end of turn. So if you want to recrew, you're going to have to do that. I want to show a couple of vehicle cards again, just by way of getting you up to date on what a vehicle card looks like. And we're actually going to go much deeper on a few of these, especially the second one, Brad. I know. Yeah. You're all ready to jump in the flagship. I can see that here. But Steve, I did want to ask you, what's your first thoughts on crew and vehicles?
I think it's a sweet mechanic. I mean, it gives you the ability to use creatures that might, later in the game, they might get outclassed by your opponent's creatures. And It's also, like, in a way, in Constructed, what's interesting is that these creatures, they aren't actually actively creatures unless you activate them. So if you're playing against a deck that plays sweepers and such, it's nice to be able to commit to the board without, compromising yourself, essentially.
That's right. Now, Brad.
Okay.
I can see that you're excited about vehicles. You look like you're ready to jump into one of these things right now. What jumps out to you about this new mechanic?
Well, the first thing about vehicles that excites me is that they're colorless. They're just these powerful creatures that have better base stats than normal creatures, with the downside that unless you crew them, they're not creatures. But the one benefit that I like about them outside of that is they dodge sorcery speed removal. So there's a lot of them in the set that have haste. So like in Constructed, they're going to beat Languishes or new Wrath effects that we're going to see coming out.
I mean, do you think, it's going to feel like, looking at the Sky Skiff here, right? It's going to feel like that has haste a lot of time anyway, right? Like you're going to have it on the battlefield and be able to just get it in the air the next time you cast a creature.
Oh no, definitely. Both Steve and Brad said, it's very good against sorcery removal, and it's gonna be interesting to see like how many of these you can put in a deck where you kind of need to balance the amount of crew members and the amount of actual vehicles, and like how that's gonna play out. I'm just gonna be ready to crew a vehicle and then use that vehicle to crew another vehicle and use that vehicle to crew another vehicle.
You're going to chain crewed vehicles.
And then I put a vehicle in your vehicle. So
I don't really like that strategy, truth be told.
You're just going to have like a parking lot full of broken cars by the end of the turn.
It's probably not going to work out too well.
Reid, Yoel brings up a really interesting point here, right? If you just play all the vehicles, then you're never actually starting any vehicles and never getting in there. And we all know that, specifically for Limited, that balance between creatures and non-creatures can be pretty touchy. How do you think vehicles play into that?
Yeah, when I first looked at vehicles, I was like, oh, it's kind of lame that I have to waste my creature to be able to activate the vehicle. But something that's might not necessarily be obvious is that you can cast a creature, and even though it has summoning sickness, it can crew a vehicle right away. So it gives you a use for creatures that can't attack because of summoning sickness, or the board is gummed up and that you don't have a profitable use for these creatures. So especially when it comes to Limited or Constructed, if you build your deck to make the best possible use of vehicles, they're just going to be great ways to spend these resources that are otherwise going unused.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I think another very interesting thing about vehicles when it comes to Constructed, the combination with manlands, where you can actually, when you run out of creatures, you can just activate a manland and crew your vehicle, and just continue that train.
The chain of attacks, yeah,
for
exactly.
Sure. So you can just make it so it never runs out, pretty much.
Yeah, the other thing, looking at the Sky Skiff here as well, is that you do get paid off, right? I mean, that's a 2-mana 2/3 flying if you can crew it, right? You would never get a 2-mana 2/3 flying, without a drawback of some sort. So it's just all about the balance. Okay, let's move on to Fabricate. This is the last of our new mechanics. Creatures with Fabricate enter the battlefield either with +1/+1 counters on them, or they create 1/1 colorless artifact servo tokens. You can also modulate your creature's power to perfectly crew your vehicles, right? And that's a big deal when it comes to balancing those out. I'll bring up a couple of those. Brad, did you have something to say?
Oh, no, that was just a point I was going to make about vehicles, is this works really well with Fabricate.
Yeah, so what do you like about Fabricate in general, or what are you seeing? Is there potential here for Constructed applications with this Cultivator of Blades as an example? You basically get a whole bunch of creatures.
I don't know about that. A lot of these cards just help.
You can say no.
Limited. Yeah, I don't think so. They don't seem that powerful, but they do help with crew, and vehicles seem very difficult in Limited outside of Constructed, because Constructed is where you get to play with all the rares and mythics and the powerful creatures. So this seems like a really good mechanic to bridge the gap between the two.
So one thing that's important in Constructed, a recurring theme, is that you want to be careful with putting all of your eggs in one basket because, your Cultivator of Blades, your 5-mana creature, can just get answered 1-for-1 by a murder or whatever it might be. But Fabricate gives you the flexibility to get some guaranteed value out of your more expensive creatures, or just diversify if you're worried about something like that happening.
Yeah, another thing that jumps to mind, of course, are effects that matter for having multiple creatures on the battlefield as well. The type of cards that pump up multiple creatures. It seems like Fabricate's just custom built for that.
Yeah, I mean, in Limited, we're going to see what they end up printing, but the important thing is that you have control. As Mark Rosewater said yesterday, you're the inventor. So when Fabricate comes into play, maybe you've got multiple vehicles with low crew counts, and you need to, make some more crew members to power them, or maybe you have a big, like a flagship or something, and you'll need to actually, the power matters, right? If you have a crew 3 card, you have the option through Fabricate to either make the big creature or make the small creatures to fuel them. So
you might be the inventor, but you're the pilot, my friend.
Oh, I'm for sure the pilot in this one.
All right, let's move on to some cards. Now, these are cards that have been recently shown, and they could have huge impact. These are some of the cards that we've picked out to talk about as a panel, and also just ones that we knew that you guys would want to hear about at home. So we're going to start off with some really big hitters here. The new dual lands. You can see these here.
These are great.
And these are a big deal. So I'm going to make sure everybody gets a chance to chime in. Who wants to talk first? Yoel, you have something?
So we had these before in the old Scars of Mirrodin lands, but now they're enemy colored, as we call them. And these cards were just, these lands are great. They're just so good. They were heavily played in Standard. They're played in Modern, as we speak, in various jump decks, etc. It's going to change the difference between Jund and Absen in Modern, more streamlined, because Jund had Black Cliffs and Absen didn't, and now they do, and there's going to be all these things, and these lands are just great.
Yeah, what did you think when you first saw them, Brad?
Well, they're really good in Modern, but also to Standard. They really cater towards aggressive formats. You have really good mana in the early turns, and right now enemy mana bases have creature lands and fast lands. So I think that these are going to be the more aggressive colors, and then we're going to see the other colors maybe trying to control them.
Yeah. Reid, does this open up any doors in your mind? Do you see any decks that didn't have access to this type of mana or any color combinations?
Yeah, for sure. In basically every format that exists in Magic, these lands are going to be big. I actually played Jund in the Modern portion of the World Championships because Jund had Black Cleave Cliffs, and Abzan didn't have a similar, black fast land.
Now you get Blooming Marsh.
Yeah, now Blooming Marsh opens the door to either play, straight green-black deck or Abzan or Sultai, whatever it might be, and still have access to that super powerful effect. This is the card in Modern that you want to see in your opening hand more than anything. It's awesome, I get to cast my spells on time, not take any damage in a really aggressive format.
Yeah.
It's just great. I think the blue-red land is perfect fit for something like Delver, blue-red Delver with Lightning Bolt, Delver of Secrets, Monastery, Swift Spear. We've been waiting a long time for these lands. They're awesome.
Yeah. What about you, Steve? You like these things?
I like them a lot. They're obviously, it's interesting their point in Standard because they're sort of replacing the enemy Painland cycle, which is interesting because it's going to make the decks that want to operate on the early turns a little bit smoother, but it's going to make the decks that want to go bigger a little bit worse. Not to mention that you're actually losing the Painlands, which provided colorless mana. And as we saw through Oath of the Gatewatch, there's a lot of cards that people might be playing in Standard, like Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher, using colorless mana, and that we're actually losing that dual land cycle essentially, and
I think we're all sick of them too, though.
Oh, sure.
I think we just don't need that.
I'm totally fine with that. That's fine.
I'm not sick of them yet, so I'll see you at the next Pro Tour.
I'll let you guess what they played in the Modern format. What kind of decks don't want these lands? If you're a control deck, are you just nah, I don't need these type of things, or do they still end up making the cut?
I think it really depends how fast the format's going to be. If control decks have to interact a lot in the early turns, but not later in the game, it's still going to be good for control decks. It just depends how the format will develop overall, I think. But it's obviously worse for control, for sure.
The big thing about the enemy cycle or enemy color combinations for Standard is that after turn 3, all of your dual lands come into play tapped. So you might want a lower curve. You may be able to build your deck to be bridged at 3 and 5s or 4 and 6s. But you're not going to want just an up curve, maybe a green-white deck might want, because those lands could be sequenced in a way to get them all into play untapped. So I think that's what we're going to see.
You're actually just going to build your deck fundamentally around the fact that you're going to plan for having some lands come into play, some tapped on certain turns.
I mean, you have to, or you're just going to, have a flagship in your hand and be really excited and just top deck like a Hissing Quagmire and then not be able to cast it.
It's a sad story.
Yeah, I think there's a limit to how many you want to play. Like, say for the sake of argument, you're playing a Sultai color deck. You have access to the black-green fast land, the blue-green fast land. You might not want to play all 8 because then, as Brad mentioned, you put yourself in a situation where you can't wait to draw your 4th land for your big expensive card, and you know that 3/4 lands in your deck come into play tapped. It's not a great feeling. So there's a balance to find.
How deep do you guys think these lands can go? I mean, we have seen them in Modern. Occasionally, they'll replace dual lands even in later formats. Given the state of things currently, are these going to see play outside of Modern?
I don't think so, unfortunately.
You just have too high of a bar to reach.
Actual dual lands and fetch lands and brainstorms to go with that, and it's just very hard to break that kind of very powerful mana bases.
Yeah, and one of the things to note here is, of course, these do not have the basic land types on them. They are just non-basic lands. Okay, we've picked some cards, and by we I mean all of us we got together last night, had a snuggly little meeting where we decided to pick out certain cards for you guys. So let's take a look at our first color pair here. We've got Sky Sovereign Consul Flagship.
I wonder who's that
Who wants to guess who picked it?
Can you guess whose that is?
Yeah, Yoel, go ahead and Speedway Fanatic. So what do you like about this 2-card combo here, Brad? What's got you going?
Well, the thing is, let's look at the Mythic, right? Like, this card looks like Infernal Titan. It's really powerful. It comes into play, can deal with Planeswalkers. It's any color. So, like, you can play this in a blue deck or a green deck that normally doesn't have good answers for Planeswalkers or creatures. But then if you pair it with Speedway Fanatic, maybe Thalia's Lieutenant gets it to 3 power, maybe use it along with another creature, you have this 6/5 that comes in play and deals with something, attacks, and deals with something else. So you can take down a huge creature, a big Planeswalker, in a color that normally doesn't have that reach. And so I'm a really big fan of this card. I think it's going to see constructed playable. Like, when I saw it, I was just like, this is their card. Like, this is one of the Avacons or the Emrakul's or something that, like this is the legendary permanent from this set. I think this is going to be winning a lot of matches when it comes out.
Yeah, they didn't hide it, did they? They
No.
put Flagship right on the title.
It's also just my favorite type of Magic, which is just battle cruiser Magic, and it's literally just a battle cruiser. Like, you just build up to this huge, gigantic ship and attack people.
Yeah, it's funny. The picture is literally a big battle
It's
cruiser.
Brad in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah.
This is his style.
He's going to get sick of me playing
together
this.
on the
Yeah,
Pro
I mean,
Tour.
I'm testing with this guy. It's going to be annoying.
How many Sky Sovereign decks do you think he's going to pitch to the team? Is like, this is the one.
Just a few.
So there's 5 colors, and there's, 10 color combinations? So, like, 15? Oh, and there's Eldrazi, so that, I don't know. There's going to be a lot, though.
There's a lot of lands. You can just go 3 colors, too. You'll figure it out.
You're in trouble.
What do you guys think about this combo that Brad's discovered here?
Yeah, I mean, like Brad said, you can set it up for the crew. Like Brad mentioned, Thalia, obviously Always Watching is another card that can pump you up. But the other thing about the flagship is that we were saying before about vehicles, it's just so powerful for any aggressive strategy to be able to play a creature that cannot be killed by sorceries. We have Ruinous Path. There's probably going to be another Sweep that they print. But to be careful that though, there is the Sky Sovereign is a legend, so you can't get those chaining vehicles like Joel was saying with them. So.
That's a good thing to know that it is a legend. What about the Speedway Fanatic though? Is that like a critical piece of the puzzle for you, or is that just like a cool 2-card combo that you see?
I mean, it's not a critical piece of the puzzle because, like I said, Sovereign is colorless. It can go into any deck. There's going to be a lot of strategies that just need that type of effect at the top end. But when I'm looking at a new card from a new set, I don't want restrictions. I don't want to know like what deck exactly needs it. I just want to see how busted the card can be. And Speedway Fanatic is exactly what you're looking for. A way to give it haste, attack it right away. Especially since you already have to crew, like you're going to have to tap a creature anyway. Might as well have an ability with being a crew.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that coming to vehicles, there's some aggressive ones, and since you can play it in all the colors, like it's colorless, I think you're gonna have some cards that makes it better to play it in their color. For example, the Pilot. As we have seen in Standard for a long while now, red hasn't really been a thing, I mean, I've splashed for Fire Impulse and played Castle's turn, but Castle's turn is not even red. You know? so I think we're gonna see some kind of return of like good red cards, and the Pilot's just an example of a card that would make other vehicles better in red decks.
Okay.
And I think red is coming back.
I laughed the other day on the stream. Big Z was talking about Speedway Fanatic, and he's like, yeah, forget about the vehicle thing. 2-1 haste, cool. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing is that this card is not even that bad, on its own. Even if you only have a small handful of vehicles you draw, it's a reasonable creature. It's good for an aggressive red deck.
That's a really good point. You just curve out with a Speedway Fanatic, and it kind of gets you coming and going. That's actually pretty good.
Definitely.
Okay, let's take a look at our next set, and I know that these ones are for you. We've got 3 different cards, but they're kind of in 2 groups. So we'll start with Filigree Familiar for you. Yoel, can you read that one for us and tell us what you like about it?
All right, so all of these cards, I mean, they're kind of 2 sides of myself. Like, one side is the sweet value, like kind of kitchen think Joel.
The good side of you.
I'm just gonna attack and try to win again, Joel. Part of me.
So where do you want to start?
So
the value side or the attack side?
So Filigree Familiar is just a great card. It's any that can play it. I would say it's close to kitchen things, but you don't get a returning body, but it's really close. And we all remember how good kitchen things was. And still is in Modern. It's just a great card. And I think this can just be a natural way for a mid-range deck or a control deck to continue to hit their lands. If they're lucky, they might trade this off. Like, this is even better than Nissa in the early game.
Can we also say that we've been playing Pilgrim's Eye a lot lately, and this card just seems like a strict upgrade?
Yeah, can we just...
You can definitely say that. Yeah, of note here, Filigree Familiar is an artifact creature as well, in case that matters for delirium purposes, like you were mentioning.
For Emrakul, for example.
Yeah, for Emrakul. And then, we have seen quite a few cards in this set that seem to care about artifacts or you controlling them, and this will meet that criteria as well.
Yeah, it's just this just seems like a supernatural fit with Ishkana, for example.
There you go.
It's just the same type of decks just wants to play these cards, and it's just going to be great, I think.
Yeah, Emerge.
Anybody?
Also. All right, let's get to the vehicle.
All right, Brad wants to man the vehicle. Go ahead, Yoel. So Fleetwheel Cruiser and Saheeli Rai.
Yeah, so Fleetwheel Cruiser on its own, it's just... what you got to think about cards when you're trying to rate them early is that no card is ever good in a vacuum, as a Magic deck is never good in a vacuum. It's always about what the meta says and like how good is this card right now, depending on what the other decks has, etc., etc. But you can, to get some sense, you can compare them to old cards. For example, Surak, I mean the 5/4, and sometimes it with haste. This is just always haste for any color combination, which lets me believe it has potential. I think it's just a powerful card attacking in for 5. And then if you want to get real crazy, you can combine it with Saheeli Rai. I would assume Saheeli Rai, I don't like Saheeli Rai that much right now.
Okay.
Because I don't have a actual super combo besides this. Because Saheeli Rai is a planeswalker that just isn't powerful on its own. It doesn't protect itself. But however, if you have it, for example, in sideboard against a deck that doesn't attack them much, play it on turn 3, it's going to be a big threat if you have cards like Fleetwheel Cruiser. It's just going to attack him for 10, on turn 4.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, right? I mean, you can play a Saheeli Rai plus, then the next turn play Fleetwheel Cruiser and just tend them.
Yeah, exactly. Just tend them with trample.
That's pretty brutal.
that can definitely lead to some fast wins.
And that's the big thing about Standard right now that I've noticed is when both life totals are really high, you don't really have to worry about them, and the boards can keep building up. But once one player is very low on life as a resource, it's really easy to use powerful cards in a combination to just sneak through that extra 4 to 6 damage. It might leave you completely vulnerable if the game continued, but it's always really difficult for a deck to come back from such a huge life deficit like that. And this card really pushes that.
There hasn't really been any super good card that gains you life for a while. I mean, we had Course of Crucifix and Siege Shrine a while back. Those are the best cards ever to gain life, but that just hasn't been a thing. Maybe Filigree Familiar would change that a little bit, but going low on life, like Brad said, it just lets you being able to be burned out or attack through or sneak in damage, and I think that's a big thing of coming standard.
Steve, when you see this type of combo, this Fleet Wheel Cruiser into Saheeli Rai, what jumps out to you? Is this a risky thing for you? Is this something that gets you going?
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, with a high risk, high reward, right? You're playing a burn deck, like Brad and Joel said. If you get your opponent low, it's going to be very easy to finish them off. But even a simple card like Grasp of Darkness, which is going to be in a lot of decks, can break up something like this. For 2 mana, if you're going to spend 4 mana on your cruiser, try to copy it with Saheeli Rai, all I need is that Grasp of Darkness. All of a sudden, I'm untapping. And
You brought
I'm
the
playing,
Dies to Doomblade argument here.
Well, this is, though, piling on a couple of extra things onto the plate before the Doomblade comes and smashes it.
Sure, yeah, and I'm sure, and that's why in your blue-red decks, if you play a deck like this, you need to take account for that. You might need some card drawing. You might need some way to come back from that.
Yeah. Reid, too risky?
Well, the
Just
first
risky
thing
enough?
that Joel said was it's a Planeswalker that doesn't protect itself, which that's a great point. It's a huge deal. One of the first things you look for with Planeswalkers. However, historically, sometimes with Planeswalkers, the best defense is a good offense, as they say. And some, a curve out like this that we're talking about, put them at 9 life on turn 4. Now they're in the position like, okay, I can send some creatures to the Planeswalkers, but you also have a 5/3 creature, and I'm at a low life total, so I can't really do both at the same time. I can't block and pressure the Planeswalker. Sometimes you can put your opponent in tough spots.
So
No,
the
definitely.
best defense is a good offense?
Yeah, definitely. You can compare it to the old Cough of the Hammer, which was an amazing card in Standard at that point. Sure, we had like Callblade, which kind of disabled that card, but it was still an amazing card in the sense of just a good offense, a good defense there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Steve, you've got some exciting ones to line up here. You've got Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter, and Verdurous Gearhulk. You went big, man. You're not messing around.
Yeah, I mean, these are the cards that excited me. The big green cards. That's kind of my style. Like the kind of decks I like to play. Rashmi is pretty exciting to me because I think that what she does well is just draw you extra cards, which is great. But she works good with cards that find her. So essentially, if you're playing cards like Oath of Nissa, cards like Anticipate, you can use those cards to find Rashmi. And then once you find her, those cards fuel your deck. Then you're drawing extra cards every time. If you play ramp spells, they're cantripping, and you're potentially casting free spells off her. It's better than cantripping essentially because every time you cast a spell, if you reveal a spell that is less, then of course you get to cast it for free. Not to mention we haven't seen the whole set, but there could be scry cards. So there could be big, huge turns where you set the top of your library, cast apart the Water Veil. You're exiling the right card, and you're just essentially annihilating your opponent. So I like that it fuels itself. Drawing cards is fun, playing big spells is fun. So I like Rashmi a lot.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that I look at, and I'm just like, somebody's going to do something disgusting with this card.
Oh yeah, I think Steve has a nice point about Part of Water Whale. I think that combo is like, obviously it's super sweet. Let's just start there. But one thing about this legendary creature is that it's only when you cast your first spell each turn that you get the ability, which is a very powerful ability. I mean, it's very comparable to Cascade. And when I say that everybody know what that means, pretty much. And if you cast Part of Water Whale, you get the ability, but you also get it next turn, which is a huge factor. And the other way you can look at it is you can play this card, and you can try to play cards in your turn and your opponent's turn, because it triggers in their turn too. So with every flash card, it's just going to trigger multiple times, and that can be very, very powerful.
Wow. I'm sure the Commander players have their eye on Rashmi as well.
I was about to say, I might get thrown off this panel if I mention Commander, but, a 5-player game, you get to trigger this 5 times every round.
All right. Now, you said you like to do big things. Verdurous Gearhulk is about as big as it gets for 5 mana.
Yeah, Verdurous Gearhulk is an awesome card, I think. It's the direct comparison is the Wolfear Silverheart. If you guys aren't familiar with that card, it was a card from Absent Restored that essentially gave a creature +4/+4 when it came into play. The Gearhulk is nice for many reasons. The first one is it's an artifact. We'll see coming up in this set what you can do with artifacts. We don't know exactly what it's going to mean right now, but we know at least there's a few combos with it. The other thing is that it's just, I think it's good in all states of the game. It's nice, if you're behind a Planeswalker, your opponent is Liliana Liliana the Last Hope. Mm-hmm. On one of your creatures, and you're falling behind the Liliana, you can play a Gearhulk to pump your creature up, attack Liliana, catch back up. It lines up well against some cards that I think are going to be in the format, like Reflector Mage and Spell Queller, stuff like that. Just a big green effect. Like Reid said before, it's nice to have cards that you don't want to ever put all your eggs in one basket. If you're playing an aggro deck, you can distribute the counters. You don't have to put them all on one creature. So you can go wide, or you can go really big on a Sylvan Advocate or something to kind of just push through a ton of damage.
Yeah, this is pretty much the reinforced card the best reinforced card that doesn't say reinforced.
Yeah, Reid, you love green. Is this is this right up your alley?
Yeah, I mean, this card's sweet. Remember when Force of Nature was one of the best creatures in Magic? This guy's looking pretty good, and I'm waiting to see if there's going to be a 15 mana crew 8 ship for Brad to use this guy.
I would need this card, but I actually
Emrakul ship.
yeah, I was thinking about it with you guys saying that. I was thinking about the blue-green card. It's like you guys are like talking about Part the Waterville. I'm like, if I can set my deck up, I just want to Emrakul into Ulamog, like just get the whole band back together. But this giant Hulk, the thing I like the most about it is that it, in Magic and in a game, like you think of it right now in a vacuum, but like in an actual game, all the little dials that it creates is going to be important. Like you don't know right now that you're going to need your 2/3 to become a 3/4 and this to become a 5/5, and your 1/1 to become a 3/3. And so like in these games, you're going to be able to like completely change the math, and it's going to be really difficult to play against because your opponent never knows exactly how big your creatures are going to be when you when the opponent's attacking.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also going back to crewing, right? If you can get one creature at exactly the right crew level, tap that one to make a vehicle active, and then still have your other creatures to attack. That's ideal.
Not only does it like build well with crewing up your small guys so it can crew, but it also plays into like the card plays into having a massive board where sweepers generally are good, and if you have a vehicle, that's not going to be hit by the sweeper. So,
the one thing I'd like to say is like I don't know if this giant 8 power worth of creature is going to become a deck or going to go into a vehicle deck. Like I feel like vehicles are going to be like helping the little creatures have bigger effects.
Gotcha.
I mean, this is just a giant green card. Like, yes, it's going to be able to drive in one of these vehicles, but I don't think the deck's going to need it. Yeah,
that's a license for sure.
Gear Hulk in
I just think it is a vehicle. Look at it.
It would rather
giant.
drive itself, if anything.
Yeah.
I think I'm fine with that.
There's a decent chance that the Gear Hulk just doesn't need a vehicle to ride at all. It's fine on its own.
It might not fit.
It's true. All right, one more card. We've got Gear Per Orrery here. Reid, this is the card that really jumped off the page to you when we were taking a look at it.
Yeah, I like this one. So this is what I usually call a symmetric effect. It can help both players in the same way, which means you have to be careful with it. The last thing you want to do is let your opponent draw 3 cards before you've gotten any use out of your card. But it also means the rewards tend to be extremely high if you can set yourself up to make better use than your opponent. And I mean, 3 cards every turn, it's just outrageous. This is going to be at its best in like a low mana curve deck where you can empty your hand and really take advantage very quickly of those extra cards that you're drawing. It's also good with cards that can keep cards in the opponent's hand, like a Vapor Snag, Adjust the Wind, something like that. And yeah, just to draw inspiration from some old decks that have used cards like this, you could play burn decks in the past have used like Grafted Skullcap, Howling Mind, Fevered Visions more recently. This card has a similar effect that you could see it alongside Fevered Visions in certain decks. Also just like
discard
turbo land
outlets
strategies.
Like, is discard outlet, like, can you discard for value and then just to rebuild back up? Is that a thing that you'd be looking at?
Yeah, having ways to discard is going to be perfect with the Gear Per Orrery because it means you can manage your hand size. You can make sure your hand's empty every turn. If you just get unlucky and draw 3 lands with your draw step, you're not going to be able to play all 3. So you need other ways to get it out of your hand. In a Madness deck, especially alongside burn spells or blue, tempo-based spells, this card's just gonna be awesome.
Like cards like Noose Constrictor, for example, Lighting Axe are perfect examples. I think that it also is gonna go well where if you're trying to play discard effects and discard, it's kind of works with graveyard strategies too because you kind of want some kind of value for discarding your cards. You know what I mean? I don't want to play a Noose Constrictor and then turn 4 I play this and just dump my hand, which is like 4 cards, and I just switch them for 3 new ones. I need some additional value to go with that. But you can also look at it the other way, as Reid talked about. I played Howling Mind effects a while back, where in decks that tries to take extra turns, and that can be like super powerful too. You play this, play another land, then like you dump your hand into Ram spells, and then you can spot a water whale, enter your hand, take another turn, draw 3 cards, like just pretty much combo off.
Yeah, no, that seems.
It's a very, very powerful card.
Brad, what's the risk of playing cards like Gyrup or Orrery, right? It's not all sunshine and roses when you throw one of these on the table.
I mean, there's a lot of risks when it comes to these things. I just want to make one point about it that, everyone sees it as this like engine and that you can like keep cards in your opponent's hand or make them draw extra cards. I just see another card that works with Reflector Mage. That's all I see. Just another 4-mana card that lets you play Reflector Mage.
That's mean.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
You just strand a card in their hand for a turn cycle.
For 2 turns.
Oh, that's so mean.
But I mean, there are risks to cards like this because you just die. Like we said, like we can have like Speedway Runner with a haste or a bunch of aggressive elements. And when you're trying to set up something that is like turn 4 is a very important turn in Magic. Because sometimes accelerants let you play a 5-drop on the turn, or Gideon. And I mean, Gideon isn't going anywhere. Like, that card's still in Standard. It still punishes decks that are trying to do things like this. And so I feel like this is more of a casual card. Maybe it's a sideboard option. Maybe there's some crazy combo deck.
That you have to build fully around
Yes,
it.
but it's not something that I'm going to be looking for pieces. Like, the pieces have to just, like, jump out at me.
Okay. All right, so those are the cards that we chose to talk about as a group here, but we've got a couple more cards to talk about. We've got 2 exclusive preview cards just for this panel. Who wants to see them? All right, yeah, they want to see them. Do you guys want to see them?
I want to see them.
All right, let's take a look at our exclusive preview cards here. First up, Aerial Responder, and as a limited enthusiast, this card absolutely jumps off the page to me. Yoel, what was the first thing that came to mind when you saw this card?
Vampire Nighthawk, probably. Like anybody who has played Vampire Nighthawk in Old Zendikar just knows that card was completely busted in Limited.
Yes.
It was like probably the second best card in the entire set,
and an uncommon,
including rares. Oh, it's uncommon.
Yeah.
And this card, that was a very aggressive format where the lifelink and the free toughness really shined. In a format where it was really hard to block, but I think this, like, even if that's the case, this card is going to be amazing. I think in Limited, like, obviously, and when cards are amazing in Limited and they just very much overperform, I usually tend to think about them in Constructed too, because if that really happens every time, there might be somewhere to put it in Constructed.
Yeah, this is just one of those hyper-efficient cards, right, Brad? I mean, you look at it, it's just packed with stats, good at 2/3 for 3 mana, and then it has 3 different relevant abilities.
Yeah, and Vigilance is extremely relevant in Limited with backed up with combat tricks, which White usually has a lot of those. So you're able to play it early if it's not dealt with. It's just pecking away. It has a 4-point life swing, which is something your opponents can't ignore. And like they could just be spinning their wheels trying to set up all their vehicles where you're just getting in like 4 to 6 damage. Now you have this huge life buffer. And it even has constructed applications if White isn't already trying to be the aggressive color. Like we'll see what White's going to be doing. But this card seems good with like a Gideon Emblem or Always Watching. I mean, it has one of the abilities already on Always Watching. But I do think that this card has a chance at seeing constructed and being one of the best uncommons in the set for Limited.
Yeah, Steve, when I first saw this card, I thought, like, what are the chances this isn't just one of the best uncommons in the set for Limited? It just has to be on the short list, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely to be White's best uncommon. It's just a good-sized body. It's hard to beat. It's hard to race. We'll see what removal exists to kill it. Part of the problem with Nighthawk was it was very hard to kill that card in that format. So maybe we'll see if there's some good answers to the Aerial Responder.
Yeah, I mean, pack one, pick one.
Yeah, absolutely. This could easily be better than Vampire Nighthawk, especially because White is a color whose thing is pumping up creatures. You play equipment, you play Gideon Emblem, Always Watching, as Brad mentioned, combat tricks. It's shaping up that Dwarf is going to be a relevant creature
Yeah,
type.
I noticed that too. This is a flying dwarf soldier. They went deep with this set for sure.
There hasn't been a lot of flying dwarfs.
Yeah, no, I'm the card inside. I'm actually just excited to see dwarves. It's kind of like a cool new thing to Magic. This guy flies around with his hot air balloon. It's pretty cool, responding, putting out fires, doing other stuff, which is just sweet. I mean,
I did see that your favorite card is Goblin Balloon Brigade.
Goblin Balloon Brigade has a place in my heart. So I think Aerial Responder. I love this guy. He's awesome.
These look better than the dwarves from Fallen Empires.
Yeah, the dwarves have grown up a little.
I've played
since then.
plenty of Vampire Nighthawks in constructed, and I think I'll be considering this guy as well.
Okay, that's Aerial Responder. Now, that was kind of the limited focus card that we have. Our other one, it's about as spiky as they get. Let's take a look at our next preview card, Ceremonious Rejection. Blue instant counter target colorless spell. I saw the mic go up over there, Yoel. What do you think?
It's just really good. Like when they print these low-costed niche counter spells, you just have, as we see in this spell, etc. You just have this huge, it can just be played anywhere. I think this card is going to be, as Reid mentioned earlier when we talked about this card, is that it's going to be played in every single format.
Every format?
I think so.
Wow.
In Standard, there's all these Eldrazi, colorless cards, Reality Smasher, Atmosphere, etc., etc. We're going to push these guys out. This is also going to be an artifact set, so that's going to be huge there. In Modern, there's Affinity, etc. Vintage, there's Stacks, and like the Mishra's Workshop decks, etc. So I just think this card is amazing.
I just love the design of it, like actually getting to putting this in the set. It's like, all right, so we've had a lot of Eldrazi, and we have Emrakul, which isn't Eldrazi, but it's also winning a lot.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have vehicles. Like, let's just make sure that, like, if they need an answer, it is as efficient as possible.
As far as checks and balances go, we definitely have one here.
It was
I love
like
the
when
name,
they printed
too.
Annul back in cars. It's like, yep, probably should be here somewhere. You never know.
Yoel was saying that you said maybe this goes all the way back. Like, are we talking vintage here?
All the way back to vintage. We've seen Eldrazi in every single constructed format. We're going to see Ceremonious Rejection in every single constructed format. Now, I'm not trying to say this is the best card ever printed, but Annul and Steel Sabotage, these are very important niche role players in vintage, and Ceremonious Rejection is definitely on par with these, especially as these Thought-Knot Seer, like stacks, creature-based aggro decks become popular. You're going to see this card mixed in. It can counter Eldrazi's, can counter big artifacts, can counter
Black Lotus.
Can counter Black Lotus out of a Storm deck or just a normal everyday vintage deck. This is really strong card with a lot of applications.
Yeah, any card that you see, they don't usually print very efficient counter spells, and this is pretty much as good as it gets, like Reid said, in formats where there's Snapcaster Mage. A card like this is just such a huge potential for blowout. And even in a format like Standard, I have my Fevered Visions going, I have my Ceremonious Rejections in play, you're drawing extra cards, you're trying to resolve Emrakuls and Thought-Knot Seers, and I have 1-mana counter spells. Like, it's just so good, it's so efficient, it's pretty much everything you want in a clean answer.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if it makes it to any cubes as well, as there's plenty of targets for it too. All right, so those are our preview cards. Now we're going to be taking questions. We've got some actually from the internet. So we took these from Twitter, and I've got questions. I'm going to be pointing to you guys to answer these questions. So Brad, I'll start with you from King Jez. He says, what do you look for when you see previews for a new set? What are you looking for? What stands out to you?
I just want to say yes to all of them and see where they're going to be. Like, any card has the potential to doing something busted, but if you just say no and you just are like dismissive towards them, you're never going to really see how powerful they actually can be. So the first time is like, Wizards printed this, why? Like,
you're trying to reverse engineer it.
Yeah, I'm trying to reverse engineer it. They printed it. There should be a reason why they printed it. Find that reason. Find what they saw in the card first, and then we can build upon that. Like, that's what they do. They send the cards out to us, and we just, like, all figure things out a lot faster than they would have with, like, 10 people in a room. But they did make that card for a reason, and so we should find it.
Except Rune
That's
Copier.
really great.
Well, that's just not constructed.
I know.
Yoel, this question comes from Dragod, who says, when trying to learn a new draft format, what's the strategy?
All right, I think that is a tough question. Usually, I think you have to wait until the entire spoiler season is out to see all the colors and see what kind of tricks there are, which are the best cards, and its color combination, etc., etc. Like, how many top-notch commons is there in black, for example, and you kind of have to refer that, and then it's just all about like starting to actually jam drafting. Like, you might not think that a card is that great and limited because it hasn't been before, but because all of these new mechanics, this old effect that wasn't that great before has just got better. So you'll just notice these interactions when you start playing a lot. I think that's just the key to it. Just play.
Kevin Embrex wants to know, Steve, going to Kaladesh, what did you want or expected to have for standard or to change for standard? Was there something you were looking for, an answer to a problem, something like that?
I was not particularly looking for anything. You know, I was excited for artifacts mostly, seeing what kind of cool things that R&D would be tinkering with or whatever. We're seeing Collected Company rotating out of standard, which is the biggest thing, which is kind of the sigh of relief for me. I'm excited not to have to play against that card, and just seeing like what cool things you see in Kaladesh. You know, I'm not particularly excited for anything because, you know, R&D usually does a good job of surprising me, and I'm hoping that they already have, so I'm hoping that they can push through some more interesting stuff.
Yeah, we've seen a handful of cards here at this time, but there's more to come. Ultip wants to know, Reid, how do you evaluate energy cards? He says, I find cards like Die Young, which is a card that we showed yesterday, hard to evaluate because they have so many moving parts.
Yeah, and there are a lot of moving parts to energy. It's almost a brand new aspect of the game that's not going to be easy to evaluate just at a glance. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a wait and see in terms of seeing what we can actually do with energy as the new cards get spoiled, and also just a trial and error thing. Like,
sure.
I know that I'm not going to get my energy deck right the first try, but I'm going to be putting these cards in decks and seeing what jumps out at me. It seems that energy is a mechanic that you can either go full speed ahead and build an energy deck, or you can just piecemeal things together here and there. One thing I heard that's going to be very important is that every card that requires energy to use also has a way of producing energy for you. So
they may be contained. Like, you may not have to build a full-on energy deck. You may be able to have little pockets of energy in a build.
Exactly. It'll definitely be possible to build a normal deck with a small handful of energy cards, but the more you combine together, the more options you have, and the more you can use energy from one card to power an effect that might be better in the given game.
Okay.
We'll see.
I got one more question for you, sir. Watton wants to know, do you predict vehicles will be used a lot in Standard?
Yes. Not all of them, but some of them. I'm expecting them to come out with an uncommon that might be like on a low curve, and then have the big mythic 6/5 flying battle cruiser.
Your flagship.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that there'll be and the 5/3, the 4 mana rare. I'm assuming that there will be a low to the ground 2 mana vehicle that is constructed playable.
Okay. Guys, I wanted to say thank you all for joining us, and thanks for joining us, of course, on the stream, and say thanks to Yoel, say thanks to Brad here, Steve and Reid, and for joining us for Kaladesh with the pros. I certainly hope you learned something from it. That's what we were going for here, and that's going to do it. We're going to sign off. See you guys.